Hello, and welcome to the first webinar in our new Lab Live series brought to you by Lab Innovations. My name is Katie Gray. I'm the Marketing Manager of Lab Innovations, so thank you so much for joining us today. Just to give you some background on these webinars and this series, so essentially we've teamed up with key partners to bring you content that will help you in your role in the lab, whether that be in terms of sustainability, regulations, new safety measures, and we will have a lot more speakers and seminars covering a variety of similar topics and different topics, from lab management to the circular economy and digitisation at Lab Innovations on the 4th and 5th of November at the NEC. Registration is now open for that, so you can head over to our website and you'll be able to register there. You'll see lots of different safety measures and protocols as well. If you visited Lab Innovations last year and the year before, you will have undoubtedly seen the Sustainable Lab that is put on by Andy Evans. It's essentially a functioning laboratory on the show floor where Andy has sort of hourly guided tours and he presents with interesting findings. So today he will be giving you some top tips on sustainability in the lab. Before I hand it over to you, Andy, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping bits. So you can chat in there's a chat function, so you can chat away in that, but there is a slightly annoying pinging sound every time someone comments. So there's a audio icon that you can just turn off, so you don't get a ping every time someone comments. We will be sending out some polls as well, so look out for those. And we will be sort of going through Andy's presentation first, and then after that, Andy will be able to answer your questions. So I think that's all for housekeeping. So I will pass it over to you, Andy.
Oh, thanks very much. Right. Thanks everyone for coming online today. It's a lovely day to be indoors, so I do appreciate you taking half an hour of your day to join the webinar. So if we can pull the slides up, please. Thank you very much. Hopefully you can all see them. So yeah, for those that don't know, my name's Andy Evans and I've been working in lab sustainability. Well, I haven't been out in lab sustainability for the last 4 or 5 months, more or less, because obviously it's lockdown. Now, I've recently recovered from my lockdown hair, but unfortunately I haven't recovered from my lockdown bod. I've recently calculated my body fat using one of these calculators online, and if you use the Navy way of calculating it, I'm 18.5% fat, which is, that's not good. But if even worse, if you use the BMI method, I'm actually 30% body fat, which is the same percentage fat as ready salt and vinegar crisps, which goes to show you are what you eat. I suppose the good thing for some people is that my girlfriend of 15 years is looking at me like a piece of meat. It's just a shame that she's a vegan. Right, so moving on. I've been working in lab sustainability for 11 years, and these are some of my clients, all of whom have benefited from the various services that we provide. And all of these services are aimed at highlighting what problems are currently existing in the labs and then tackling them. Now, most of our clients, we tend to do a lab audit for them, and then based upon the findings there that we can do in terms of recommendations for things like how can we change our practice, how can we procure better pieces of equipment, and what training requirements are needed, we then carry out training and the necessary actions. So we've got about 20 odd minutes, and the main object of all these different services that we provide and all these different actions that we're taking is to save the planet and also to minimize all of our running costs, because money saved is money earned, and that's what sustainability is all about. Not only do we save the planet, but we minimize the running costs without having any negative effect upon the science or the scientists. Now, usually when we do training on this, I've got 5, maybe 6 hours to do the full course, but we've only got 20 minutes here. So I thought that the easiest way to share some of these ideas and tips that you can apply in your laboratories is to talk about some recent work, when the slide comes up, auditing the Roslin Institute. So as you know, the Roslin Institute is in Edinburgh in Scotland, and on the right there, that's the main chap I work for, guy called Brian McTeer. And over 4 days, I audited their laboratories. We looked at over 636 pieces of equipment, of which over 200 of those were just freezers alone. Now, on the 4th day, it had been quite a long day, and it was well into the evening when I'd finalised all the reporting that we'd done. So I had to go from Roslin down to Wallingford, which is my hometown. And that is a 380-mile trip, taking hours and hours and hours. And this is really the first thing about sustainability in labs, is that there is more than one way, more than one route to get to sustainability. Now, that is going to be based upon many different factors, one of which can be the type of organisation you are. Are you a public organisation, or are you a private? Are you a research organisation? Are you a pharmaceutical company? But the other side of it as well is the type of research that you're carrying out, the type of science that you employ, and also the type of lab operator that you are. So true lab sustainability is aimed at all 3 lab operators. So if we look at the top there, the first and main lab operators for all of us are the scientists themselves. Without them, we wouldn't need the other lab operators. But the other lab operators really do make things happen and keep the lab ticking over. So on the bottom left, we've got the people that own building management, technical managers and estates. And at the bottom, we've got procurement. And really, to achieve pure lab sustainability and actually have long-term change that makes those savings that you'll want, you need all 3 of these people working together. Now, in some organizations, people will have shared these roles. The people that are using the kit, sometimes people buying the equipment. But what we tend to find is that in organizations, we've got at least 2 of these roles are distinct. So the first thing when I got into my car was that I noticed after a while it was really, really cold. And I did notice that the aircon was on. Now, Scotland in the autumn, late at night, does not need any air conditioning. And this is really the first thing in the lab, is that when I go around and carry out audits, we do find a lot of equipment that is commonly left on that doesn't need to be on. And the most common pieces of equipment that we find are here. We've got our block heaters or dry block heaters. Then we've got our drying cabinets, and then we've got our water bath. And this is the first interactive bit for all of you guys out there. So on the left-hand side, we've got the turn-offables. And on the right-hand side, we've got the always-ons. Now, the energy these things use off the turn-offables is equal to what we see on the other side. So one of these uses twice the energy of an underbench LEC fridge at 4 degrees. Another one uses the same energy as a nearly 300-litre lab freezer at minus 28 degrees. And one of them uses the same amount of energy as 12 ULT freezers at minus 70 of that particular model. So amongst yourselves, have a quick look and see which ones you think are equated to what. We're going to have a few seconds. If you've got any questions, always ask, but we can answer those at the end. There are other bits of kit that are left on, but predominantly these are the ones when we carry out audits that are left on. A number of different universities, the number is usually between 60 to 80% of the block heaters that are left on are completely empty. And they're on at temperatures from anywhere from 37 all the way up to 100. So just a few more seconds, draw your imaginary lines across and see what they equate to, because the energy we're wasting here on these turn-offables could be running this equipment. And often these are things that we can do straight away. So let's have a look. So yeah, the first one, the dry block heater, when they're left at about 90 degrees and they've got 2 blocks like the one here, other manufacturers are available, of course, they are using the same energy as that freezer at minus 28 degrees. The next one is obviously the drying cabinets. For many years, drying cabinets were overlooked because they're kind of boring bits of kit that you just slung your glassware or your plasticware in, but they are massive energy consumers. Even a small 100-litre unit, pound for pound, will use 10 times the energy of a ULT freezer at -80. That's 600 litres or so in capacity. And then lastly, we've got the water bath. Now, there are alternatives to water bath technology now that are far more energy efficient, but just leaving this unit on, which is a 12-litre water bath with 10 litres of water in at 37, is using just over 600 watts of energy per day, which is the same energy it would cost to run 2 fridges. So that's energy we're wasting for free. So there's a lot of kit that we can turn off, but in order to be sustainable, we can't just turn off some of the kit, otherwise we're not going to get anywhere with our research and our actions. So it also is important to do the right speed with the equipment that we've got. And this is essentially one part of lab sustainability we know known as set point performance. So we've got some more. Now, there's a lot of talk about warming and making your -80s or your ULT freezers colder. But there is a percentage saving for being too cold, and there's a percentage penalty for being too cold, and there's a percentage saving for warming up a little bit. Now, these percentages, I must emphasize, vary considerably between manufacturers, and that is because of the technology they employ under the bonnet. It does vary slightly because of the size of the units, but it's actually down to the technology these manufacturers all employ. So have a think. On the left hand side here, we've got a 570 litre ULT freezer, and if I was to set it to -80 and then say, do you know what, let's have it at -85, how much more energy do you think that uses just for those 5 degrees? And then conversely, if I was to go from -80 down to -70, how much energy do you think you're going to save then? Give you a couple of seconds to think about that. One thing that we can also do, if people are worrying about warming up their freezers, is to throw some racking in there. Racking makes a huge difference to the temperature performance, and the energy performance when employing racking is negligible. So after you've had a bit of a think, let's see. So yeah, for this particular unit, just by adding 5 degrees to the temperature, you're using 15% more energy, whilst if you remove 10 degrees, then you're going down by 31%. Now, in terms of kilowatt hours per day, at -80, this unit will be using, at that ambient, about 7.8 kilowatt hours per day. When we warm it to -70, that drops down to 5. So the energy you're saving there is enough energy to power 3 -20 freezers that reach 300 litres in capacity. So again, it's energy that you can be using elsewhere. But not only that, there's also a knock-on effect. If you're saving energy and it's what it's consuming, it's also kicking out less heat, and that's less impact on your work environment and your HVAC costs. So in other bits of kit, it can actually be down to the passenger inside that bit of kit. So here with the drying cabinets, these are actually energy efficient drying cabinets, but even with them being energy efficient, they actually use a lot of energy. So we just spoke about the -70 energy consumption for ULT freezer being about 5 kilowatt hours per day. Here, above the letter A, we've got a 100 litre E3 drying cabinet set to 75 degrees. Now, this unit already is energy efficient, but that's still using 5.5 kilowatt hours per day. A less energy efficient, older technology unit would be using between 11 and 12. But it's not just about what temperature we're setting them to in the technology, is it actually suitable for what we're going to be doing this for? The idea is that the glassware, if we're drying glassware, 75 is fine. Plasticware, though, we tend to find people not wanting it to be that hot because it does warp and it can be a little bit melty. You don't want that. And for people drying pipette tips, especially after they've autoclaved them, we tend to find that they're units that are set to 50 degrees. But do you know how much energy you save if I went from A to B and then from B to C? Have a quick think. We shall have a look. Okay, so by warming up by 15 degrees, cooling down from 15 degrees from 75 to 60, you save 30% in your energy costs. And then if you go from 60 to 50 and it's appropriate for your kit, then it's also another 32%. If we went from A to C, we've got a reduction of 52%. So again, it's horses for courses, but just by putting the right temperature, not only are you saving energy, but you're also protecting the contents, such as you don't really want to be buying more pipette tips because you melted the first lot by being too hot. So the next one is freezers. Now, I left the -20 freezers to the end because although ULT freezers and drying cabinets are pound for pound real high energy users, these are the ones that really do outnumber them. I mentioned earlier at the Roslin Institute, there is over 200 -20 freezers, and many of the units were way colder than the -20 set point. And this is really wasting running costs. So here we're going to go from A to B. So if I was to go from -20 to -24, how much more energy am I using? And if I was to go from A to C, how much more energy are you using? Now, this case study was carried out at the University of Aston University in control conditions. So how much energy are we wasting by using these things? So have a quick think. Let's have a quick look at his polls. Okay, so just by going colder by 4 degrees, it's a 20% increase in energy consumption. But if we were to set them to -28, then that's 47%. It's just over 47% increase in energy consumption. So for every 2 units, essentially, we've got at -28. You could be using that wasted excess energy on running a whole new freezer at -20. The real scary thing is that a lot of the lab units, and these aren't pharmacy units or -45s, as some of you will know, you can set them to go down to as cold as -38, and we do find them at -38 when we measure them in the lab. And when they're at temperatures like that, we are more than doubling the energy consumption, and in a lot of cases, needlessly. Some people just put them as cold as they need, as cold as they go, because they think it's better for their samples, but it doesn't really have anything to do with their samples. It can actually have a detrimental effect on their unit. So one of the tips for procurement people is you wouldn't drive a car with no speedometer, and yet when we carry out our audits, we find so many units that don't even have an accurate temperature display. We have a dial like this, and in the studies we've carried out, we do find that you can have the same unit with the same dial on the same point, and yet we can observe inside the unit a completely different temperature each time. So being accurate and knowing actually what you're doing is going to allow you to be not only just sustainable, but keep your samples safe and your equipment living as long as possible. So on my journey back, I also went through an icy patch, and ice is also the most common thing encountered by drivers. 3/4 of drivers will have an accident or a scare on ice during their driving career, and ice is the most commonly observed problem or feature in freezers. So here is a familiar sight for me when I carry out these audits. Now, icing is a really good example of a problem causing more than one problem. So icing actually causes 4 problems which have knock-on effects. So can anyone name all 4 of them? If you can scribble down a couple, scribble them down, and we're going to have a couple of minutes on it. But typically in the labs that we've audited, so talking about places like Oxford, Imperial, that we've done recently, icing is the most common thing we see, and it can occur in up to 20 to 25% of units. And there's obviously ways to reduce icing, but a lot of people just leave the unit be, thinking that that extra icing is extra cold and it's good for my samples, but really it's quite the opposite. So the problem is that icing has a real branching effect, in that this one problem actually causes many, and those branches actually do reconnect and can cause the failure of the unit. But the main 4 problems associated with icing is that we've got a reduction in the available space. Now the little star there means it also has a knock-on effect. Well, we've noticed in some places when there's too much ice in the unit, there's not enough space, people just buy another unit, and that's another energy consumption, that's another space they need to occupy inside the lab. It also impedes the access to your stuff. Now this is 3 stars because not only does it take longer to get your stuff, so you've got a longer door opening time, that also means you've got higher temperature rises inside the unit, which also means your energy consumption goes up and the associated heat output, affecting your HVAC conditions. So icing also around the seal prevents the full door closure, and alongside the problems that we've observed in the second point, getting access to your stuff, it also can damage the components of the door, the hinges and the handle. Again, this is something that is preventable. But also for me, the thing that really annoys me is that it damages the drawers. When you damage the drawers, it makes it harder to get your stuff, but also you've got higher temperature rises with your door openings. It does actually make the icing increase, and those higher temperature rises again increases heat output, increases your HVAC costs. So what this is showing is that all of these issues can actually cause big problems, and this is some of the data we collected at Aston University, working with Jatin Ahmed, where you can see here, now I know this is a pretty busy slide, but what you can see is that when you don't have the drawers in your unit and you do a door opening, the air temperature will go up 3 times higher than when the drawers are in, and the sample temperature will go up over 2 times. So these things all have an add-on effect, and it also increases your energy consumption. And when you've got hundreds and hundreds of freezers, this can be quite a cumulative effect on your running costs. So at times, this is the interaction of all these different things. This is what icing does, just icing. And lab equipment cost factors are a huge part of what we do, because their interaction can help us identify features we're looking for in equipment, performance factors, but also things we're looking for in terms of procurement. Now, all the things highlighted in red here are all things that can actually have a knock-on effect just out of icing. So when we're following best practice, and on the left-hand side here, we've got a best practice guide we produced for University of Edinburgh, is that when we don't follow just one thing, but actually miss out on all the others, they can all recombine to actually lead to quite a big fall and failure in the performance of the equipment. So, and then you get a pile-up of problems. But some bits of kit, it's just important to be, and procurement tips. If you are going to buy a unit with drawers, don't buy wire drawers. They don't hold any air, unfortunately, and unsurprisingly. So as a procurement tip, buy yourself some solid drawers. They don't stop icing, but they do slow it down. And having wire drawers does, in what we've observed in the audits, you do have a higher incidence of icing in the wired units compared to the units have solid plastic drawers. So it's important also to drive safely, and with some products, just being safe is a huge way to save energy and be sustainable. Nothing more so than in fume hoods. So in the fume hood, just using the fume hood right is actually a more sustainable way to do. Now here again, we've got 4 things wrong with this fume hood. Have a quick think, 10-15 seconds. Can you see the 4 things going wrong here? And these all do have an impact on running costs. The cool thing about this, though, is that it's also unsafe. And if you can, one tip is that if you can ever combine safety with sustainability, it's more likely to be taken up, because if labs are operated in an unsafe manner, sometimes they have to be shut for a little while so people can be retrained on how to be safe. And no scientist wants to be stopped being a scientist. So here are the observed issues. We've got a lab coat here hanging up. Now that impedes airflow into the unit. B, at the back, we've got spacing between kit. All the stuff inside a fume hood should have a space of 25 mils between every single bit to allow airflow through it. Obviously, the sash has been left up, but also kit. There shouldn't be nothing in the first 150 mil of the front of the unit. Well, how does this affect running costs? Well, obviously, leaving the sash open on a variable airflow unit will waste more of the HVAC costs with the unit, but impeding the airflow means you don't get containment, and a service engineer will then have to calibrate the unit, which means it will use more energy to maintain safe containment. So on my way home, I was also needing to visit the lavatory, and on the left, this is the sign I saw. But when I pulled into the service station, it was actually just a garage, and I went in there. I said, "Oh, where's your toilet?" "Oh, we don't have one." But I said, "It's on the sign. It's not good." And I said, "Have you got any food?" And no, literally, it was petrol and a drink. And I said, "Well, that's a little bit misleading." And really, this is where I thought was a problem, because it wasted my time, it wasted my money, and it could have also caused quite a valeting cost for my car if I couldn't have made it to the next service station. But essentially, this is also what I think we have as an issue, which is, go back one, greenwashing. So greenwashing is, in my opinion, the biggest danger to all lab users, procurement, end users, working in the lab, and people paying the bills, because people end up buying equipment which isn't actually suited to their needs. And the reason why greenwashing works is that people are generally good at heart and want to buy better kit. And it increases your likelihood to buy by 20%. So the main three issues we find here is that there's proof. What are we comparing this product to? And where's the information come from? Is the information sometimes looking more official than what it is? They also use environmental words and imagery, lots of leaves, lots of eco and things like that. But is it really green or eco? 95% of greenwash products don't have any eco or green credentials. And hidden trade-offs. A lot of manufacturers will focus on one performance factor at the expense of all the others. It might have low energy, but it might not be able to hold temperature. It might have a cheap buying price, but it might have really expensive consumables costs. Think of computer printers. So here we've got an example. Now, just as a quick disclaimer, we've got to be really quick here, is that Thermo have good stuff. This is an old bit of Thermo marketing literature. But even with that crash course, on this slide, can you even spot some of the observed or potential greenwashing that's been going on? Now, we're a little bit pushed for time. However, have a quick scan through, just 30 seconds, and anything jumps out at you of proof. Has it got anything green written on there? And so on. It will jump out. So, although we're pushed for time, I'm going to go to it. Here's some of the potential greenwashing there. Firstly, the data on there isn't bona fide in certain aspects. So, is it really a fact? And in the other top corner, it's green features. We've also got lots more green imagery there. And then underneath it, we've got some energy figures that are also referenced throughout the unit. And it's also comparing what technology it's being compared to. It's actually not, this is a Class D safety cabinet, and it's not being compared to other same technology units in many occasions. And at the bottom here, we've got some really nice energy data, but how is that representative of real running costs? And unfortunately, it isn't, because the energy it's used may not be representative of the actual working hours, especially 24 hours a day. I don't know many units that are left on, but all these units also aren't tested in the same conditions, which is what the circle at the bottom points out. So really avoiding greenwashing is a brilliant way to not waste money and not spend time unnecessarily, because time is precious. So I finally made it home to see my kids, and this is really the main reason why we do sustainable science, is that we want to leave a better planet from what we've actually found it as, which unfortunately previous generations have failed us with. But because I made it home, the journey doesn't really stop. There isn't any stopping when it comes to sustainability. And this is why we're spending a lot of time generating data. So this is from the case study we did last year at the Healthcare Technologies Institute at University of Birmingham. We're testing units on the market under controlled conditions with very accurate testing kit. And there's Dan Smith from the University of Birmingham assisting me in generating the data. And we are doing that to help you find lots of sustainable options. And we've got sustainable options in terms of chillers, cold storage, rotary evaporators, water alternatives, water baths, sterilisation, autoclaves. There's lots and lots and lots of stuff, just a few mentions there. So we'll run over it a little bit, but if we've got a couple of polls ready to go, this is the first one. What would you guys like to see more of? And we've got the impact of best practice, performance comparisons between brand A and brand B. Would you like to see more emerging technology, new stuff, or the impact that procurement can have on running costs? So there's a poll there. Is that one up and running, Kate? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay. And then our next poll, ladies and gentlemen, is what did you find most interesting today? So did you like the comparison between the offerables, how much energy you can save? Did you like the speed awareness, the differences in using those set points? Did you like the example of icing and the impact of best practice? Because best practice shows that just one little action that can actually have huge impacts. Safe driving, fume hoods. Who found that most interesting? Was the greenwashing the thing for you, or did you find it all great? So the polls are in the polls tab. So there's chat, there's questions, and then there's polls. And then if you'd like to know anything more, we're going to do some questions now for those of you still here. But if you'd like to know more, this is my contact details, and I know they're available from Lab Innovations. So I did see one question about, are these things peer reviewed? No, we don't run scientific experiments per se. The kit is all tested under controlled conditions using accurate kit. We put as many controls in there as possible. For example, no manufacturer can touch their kit once it's in and being tested. And it's independent source of testing equipment as well. So for example, if a manufacturer of lab equipment also makes testing equipment, we don't use that manufacturer because we see that as a conflict of interest. Also, although scientists may want to see more peer-reviewed papers and so on, a lot of the time it can be to the exclusion of the other lab operators who may not be from a particularly scientific background, but they still want to see the data and what the potential benefits of those choices or actions can be. So loading questions. Yeah, so that was the main question we had there from Alan. And then
one person was asking where they can find the polls. So if you might see a little arrow on the right hand side of your screen. So if you click that arrow, then you can see the chat and the questions and the polls. It should give you a little notification. I think we've just had another question come in. If you'd like to address that, Andrew.
Let's have a look.
So it's one from Alan, and it's, where do you get the data for freezer savings from?
Yeah, that's what I just answered. That's what I just answered. So we do partner up with organisations. So our case study has been carried out at the Francis Crick Institute, the University of Oxford, University of Warwick, Aston University, University of Birmingham, Edinburgh Uni, Strathclyde Uni. We do partner up with actual lab users to test equipment under lab conditions, because obviously manufacturers do have varying degrees of ambient conditions and accuracy when it comes to their kit. And then we've got another question: do you have a recommendation for getting into on the overall footprint of units? So yeah, life cycle assessment. So there is an ACT label from My Green Lab that's already in for its second review. And although it's a good start, we are looking at standards in energy consumption and performance. We're actually working with a government agent to do that at the moment. And then in total life cycle assessments, it's actually making sure we've got better questions when it comes to tender specifications. So with the tenders coming out over the next 12 months and are actually going to be quite significantly different from what we've seen in the past, and they're weighted in a way that tries to highlight and tackle more of this information, actually helps end users make more informed decisions. And then, can I say anything general about substituting functional and eco units, CK? Anything sort of, yeah, so replacing equipment is also, based upon payback periods, of course, but replacing or upgrade your fume hoods from CAV to VAV if you can. Definitely replace your drying cabinets. We've got the best paybacks on those, but also water savings on things like waterless condensers. But we've also got, there's 3 new pieces of kit, 2 of which are inventions that are going to be showcased, fingers crossed, at Lab Innovations, and they are based for chemists and materials researchers. We've got Alison Pugh. Yep, Alison, the slides are going to be available to see after the webinar. So that's it for now. For those of you who are still on, thank you very much. Feel free to contact me about anything else, other questions, or if you're interested in getting involved in case studies or lab audits, that would be great. I'll leave it to Katie to close up for the day.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. I think everyone who joined the webinar today agrees that it's very useful. I think in the poll, we currently have winning. What did you find most interesting? It was all great. So happy days. But yeah, thanks again so much, Andy, for joining us for our first Lab Live webinar. And thank you for everyone joining us. As we mentioned, you'll be able to visit Lab Innovations and visit the Sustainable Lab and get sort of hourly guided tours from Andy. And he'll be able to sort of present to you in more detail the data-rich case studies that he's been working on. So there is a link in the chat to register. We will be sending you a replay of the webinar after, so you can catch up and you can share it with your colleagues. But until then, yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks again, Andy.
Thanks very much. Take care. Have a good day. See you soon.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.